All right, strap in, councillors. Big agenda. Whakatakata hau ki te uru, whakatakata hau ki te tonga, kia mākina kina ki uta, kia mataratara ki tai, he hi ake ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei Māori ora. Welcome to this full council meeting, big agenda, number of things. Meeting's live streamed, the light is on. There's a workshop following this meeting for councillors, and I'm proposing to move item 8 up the agenda. That is interim public transport private share targets, because there are a number of people for public participation who may want to stay for the deliberation on that particular paper. So, first issue is apologies. I've got Councillor Gaylor for absence, and I may leave early depending on how fast we get through the agenda. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Ropata and Councillor Duthie. All those in favour, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Okay, paper passed. Thank you. Conflicts of interest. Time to fess up. Nothing? Okay. Right, moving on to public participation. I've got two public participators on my schedule. Francis Mountier, do you want to come forward? So I'm not sure if this has been explained, but you've got 5 minutes to speak. Bell will go at 4, and then we'll open for questions to councillors. In your hands, thank you.
Tēnā koutou katoa, he mihi tēnei ki Te Atiawa Taranaki Whānui ki ngā kai konihira, koutou katoa ki ngā kai whakarongo. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Francis Mountia hau.
Great, taku ingoa.
We are here on behalf of Free Fares, or our formal name is the Aotearoa Collective for Public Transport Equity. I'm Pākehā. I grew up in Christchurch, but live in Newtown, where I'm the mama of 2, and we relied on the bus all of the time when the kids were little. I'm very grateful to be the activist in residence at our local community centre in Newtown, working on the Free Fares campaign. We hear every week from whānau who can't afford to get, for example, their kids to school at the moment. But the Free Fares Kaupapa Campaign Coalition is over 100 organisations who stand together for the call for free public transport for those who would most benefit from it, who most need it. That is under 25s for that generational shift, students of all ages, community service card holders and total mobility card holders and their support people. As I say, there's unions, student unions, faith groups, some councils, anti-poverty groups, climate groups. A huge range of organisations are a part of this call for Free Fares, and we have been delighted. There's also massive public support for such a call. Early polling of ours showed 80% support for that call. We call for that to be funding from central government so that it applies across the motu in all sorts of councils, all facing the kinds of constraints like yourselves. We don't mind whether that's delivered like the Super Gold Card from MSD or like Community Connect or like more funding through Vote Transport. We want it to be provided across the country from central government. And we were delighted that there are permanent half-price fares for community service card holders. So we say we're 1/8 of the way towards our coalition's big goals. And we stand in that struggle because of climate justice, because of the cost of living crisis, and because communities benefit when people can travel not just to school, appointments, education, but also to see friends in beautiful places and new places and local shops and the library and all of those reasons too. We have recently run a petition over the last few weeks that over 6,000 people signed against these proposed fare hikes that NZTA we're writing to all of you for, and that's currently before the petitions committee. We are really here today to applaud Greater Wellington Regional Council for your direction of travel. We want to see fares more affordable for people, not less. We appreciate your leadership in this space. Any increase in fares makes life that much more difficult for people in our region, as anywhere. We understand the situation you find yourselves in, but like yourselves, ECAN, I know Otago Regional Council are out for consultation. We applaud your direction of travel. We look forward to these fare hikes one day being a thing of the past, and we'll get back to our normal work, which is advocating for more affordable fares for those who need it most. Kia ora.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor Connolly.
Thank you very much for your deputation this morning. Wonderful. And for all the work you're doing in this space. What do you think of the government's private share target? And what have you been doing in terms of, talking to central government about that policy?
Yeah, we obviously think it's deeply problematic and unrealistic, and also the wrong direction, to be considering Community Connect or gold cards to change that definition away from fare box recovery to private share. We have sought meetings. We have met with Andy Foster, Chair of the Transport Select Committee. We have sought meetings with Minister Bishop. We've met in the past with Simeon Brown before he was the Minister. We continue to work in that space, but we turned instead to the petition to show the public opposition to any fare hikes, and I think it's much deeper than that. There would be few people who can afford a sudden increase in fares, and it would be few who want to see us move to a more carbon intensive form of transport or see greater congestion in our cities. So we've been running since 2021. We show and build that public support. We seek meetings where we can with central government, but we also just carry on the work, holding open the window that one day fares will be free for those who most need it, with all those benefits we all collectively experience.
Councillor Kirk-Bennett.
Thank you for your comments on that. My question really is about who do you want to pay for this? Because at the moment, about 20% of our costs come from the users, about 30% from the ratepayers, and about 50% from the taxpayers. And when we look at the actual fares on a worldwide standard based on disposable income, we're about the third cheapest in the world or lowest in the world, sort of thing. And so I'm asking you, who do you think should be paying if it's not the user? Should it be the ratepayer or should it be the taxpayer?
So our campaign call is for it to be from central government. There's so many benefits of high functioning and affordable public transport that increases patronage, that helps us with what I see as a collective climate solution, that you just step out the door and the bus or the train is the obvious course of action rather than private transport. That's what we continue to work towards with these 100 organisations behind us. It's a difficult moment right now, but that remains our whāinga. That's what we want to see in the way that MSD funds Super Gold Card. Like, there are various options how central government can fund that.
Okay, thank you. I know my ratepayers I represent will be very pleased to hear that.
Councillor Saul.
Thank you for coming in this morning and for your work on this campaign. Just a couple of questions. Do Free Fares as a collective have any ideas or suggestions on how we can encourage more people to sign up to Community Connect? Because I think there's quite a low awareness that those discounts are available. So given that you work with a lot of the community at that service level, do you have any ideas? And my second question is, in terms of your national focus as a campaign, what are you presenting in terms of comparative transport costs for other modes, and is that well understood in terms of the benefits of public transport, but some of the actual costs that are being socialised of other transport modes?
Certainly. On your second question, we often, our researcher may well gather that given those costs of the sort of state costs of private transport are huge, but relatively misunderstood when we just step out the door to travel somewhere, let alone public health costs, let alone climate costs. So an amazing thing about fares being free for those who most need it, or heading in the direction of more affordable, is that in that moment it's easy to go and take the public transport. At the moment, there are huge costs associated with private car use. But
Let me rephrase the question of, do you think that is that a role that your organisation plays in helping people understand those different costs and benefits? And how much focus do you put on that?
Yeah, and we want to increase our kind of communication in that space. Yes. On Community Connect, we, under a previous moment, we were meeting with MSD to try and encourage them to do that work. We would love to see there being leaflets and buses. On our own side, we've had it suggested that on the back of all our flyers, that is a real discount that a lot of people can access right now and don't necessarily know about when I sit at Newtown Community Centre. So we would love any promotion of that from yourselves, from central government one day, and from our own work as well, because that's one way people can access more affordable transport right now. Kia ora.
Okay, Councillor Lee.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for coming. Are you looking at like a staged approach? Because currently there are free fares, but you've got to be over 65. So I know the US has a lot of things right and a lot of things wrong, but they provide generally free fares for school kids. So is that like the next stage of your campaign?
Yeah, like to me, it's fabulous that though it's different in different towns, that Super Gold Card does exist and it shows the model. We've also all experienced half price fares across the country. I don't mind what order it's delivered in. If we saw it for under 25s first, that would be fabulous to roll out in that other way. If it was, in any of those target groups for us, but yes, it's wonderful that there are those examples in different cities across the world where some groups receive free transport, for example, students. It leads to all these benefits for the city, for the country, for the economy. So we want to build on what discounts already exist and go forward from there.
Okay.
And for that cost to be socialised to the taxpayer?
We want it to be held by central government. That's right, there are massive benefits. As we said, this is a very real cost that many people face that could be reduced. It's a very significant part of New Zealand's carbon emissions, and it has all these other benefits for our community. So yes, that is our call. Like the Super Gold Card is funded by the state, free transport for these groups, we work towards it one day being funded similarly.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Korua, for coming in and taking the time.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Kia ora.
Next presenter is Tony Randall. Morning, Tony. Now, I understand, I'm sure you're going to say this anyway, but you're here in a personal capacity?
Yes, that's correct. So I just want to be very clear. Although I'm a Wellington City Councillor, I'm not here representing Wellington City in any way. This is just a personal initiative, just to outline some points about the fare targets. I wanted to start, and my most important point is to start with, to remind you not to forget the submission from the Wellington City Council, though. The report is very much focused on the overall fare recovery levels that you're experiencing. And it's a bit disappointing, really, that there's really two stories across Wellington regional public transport. One is that the Wellington City bus service has recovered from COVID. Its patronage is up and growing. Its fare recoveries are more in the 30s. I understand, and overall, it's actually meeting the government's targets, getting close to that, and I think that's an important element because a lot of the points from the city council is it's meeting those targets because Wellington City residents are paying much higher fares for the distance that they're covering. So they're being overcharged in a sense, in a relative sense. And the Wellington City Council submission really asks for you to relook at that. And I really want to make sure that as part of this exercise, that's not put aside or set aside. And that's probably my most important point. I wanted to remind you that rebalancing really does need to be looked at again. And that's what the council asks. The other part of it really is talking about the fact that there's no such thing as a free lunch. Not asking the people who are taking the transport alternative to driving to pay for the benefit that they receive for their journey means that someone else pays. I was looking through the report, and I know you're looking at different options to try and increase the revenue, but it's also notable that from pre-COVID, where you were getting 37.2% of your costs, now down to 20.5%, there's no information as to why that is happening in terms of people actually using the service. And the question has to be made, and it's a difficult question, I know, and it's a question that we would all be reluctant to say, but do we need to review the services? Where is it that people are not travelling? It's not, people are travelling in Wellington City on the buses, they are. But they're obviously not travelling elsewhere, otherwise they'll be paying for it, assuming, of course, they are paying for it. I think that the patronage review side of things needs to be looked at, because otherwise the ratepayers are going to pay for the cost of increasing your services. And I read in your plan, the plan is to further increase services, but the patronage isn't there. I also want to make a note, and this is something Wellington City is struggling with as well, around work from home. And is that permanent? Is this drop-off in patronage use permanent? Yes, there's a build it and you can come thing, and certainly the reliability of the train service has had an adverse impact, and I absolutely recognise that. And fixing that is, obviously very important, and that may bring some people back, but we need to be sure about that before we spend literally hundreds of millions of dollars on maintaining or even increasing services. We need to know why people are not travelling, and is it really the reliability? Is it really the reliability, or is it that they actually have changed their work practices, and this is the way cities are going to go forward in the future? So I would ask that there is some difficulties. I know you're very challenged on the fare stuff, but I also want to go back to my main point, because I don't want to let this other point overshadow things. That is the request that you also take the City Council's submission on rebalancing the fares, looking at that distance for amount paid seriously as you go forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Questions, councillors? No questions. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Right. Moving on to items 4, 5 and 6. So item 4, confirmation of the public minutes of the council meeting on Thursday the 27th of February 2025. Really up before I can even get it out of my mouth. Councillor Duffy and Councillor Saw.
Just noting in these particular minutes that under section 6.3 it's misspelt. It needs an edit. What is currently 3 is actually a bullet point. That should be A.
What page is that?
Good question. 6.
Yeah, that correction will be made. Was yours just secondly? Okay. All those in favour, I will make that correction. All those in favour, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Paper 5, confirmation of the public minutes of the council meeting on Thursday the 13th of March. Mover and a seconder, Councillor Nash and Councillor Connolly. All those in favour, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Paper passed. Thank you. Confirmation of the public minutes of the extraordinary council meeting on 20th of March 2025. Mover and a seconder, Councillor Kirk-Bernand and Councillor Connolly again. All those in favour, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Right, main meal. Interim public transport private share targets was item 8, is now item 7. Kia ora kora. Right, in your hands if you want to take us through the paper.
Morena, councillors. Brief introduction. So we have had a few discussions and workshops with you. This is the first opportunity to put all the information into a formal paper. So it does include quite a bit of material that dates back to the introduction of this policy in November 2024. Obviously, we have gone through a lot of dialogue with the agency, NZTA, and with our colleagues in public transport authorities around the country. So there has been quite an evolution in the discussion, but we'll take the paper as read, and I suppose really just happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Questions, councillors? Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Morena kora. I'm aware that we're currently hearing the regional public transport plan. How does that process and the hearings and deliberations yet to come for that relate to this? Is there room to adjust these targets should there be something coming out of that public transport planning that would, how do they relate to each other, please? Well, in effect, the relationship is actually with the, through you, Chair, with the LTP. So this is very much an LTP question or an annual plan question rather than a regional public transport plan. So it is about financing. So it is a relationship with the LTP. The current LTP is in place. And one of the things that we and our colleagues around local government pointed out when these private share targets were introduced, that we have local government processes that we must follow. The private share targets were introduced sort of out of sync with our natural local government cycles. And so this is about alignment and continued alignment with our LTP.
Okay, Councillor Staples, and then Councillor Kirk-Bernand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question you may not be able to answer, but what happens if we don't achieve our private share targets that we adopt? So, you know, I see on page, whatever it is, 318, that provided we can show we're working towards it, we might be okay. But what if we're not? I mean, do we have any indication of what might happen, or whether we get a smack on the hand, or because it just seems to me we can say we're working towards it and we can adopt these targets, but you can't get blood out of a stone. So
through you, the chair, I think this is the biggest outstanding question for us at the moment, is exactly what happens if we don't meet these targets. I think, as this council will be aware, there are factors that aren't necessarily in our control, and there are some factors that are in our control when we look at trying to achieve these targets, particularly around revenue and cost. And the discussions, the informal discussions we've had with Wakatahi NZTA suggest these targets are in place to incentivise us to obviously be more efficient in what we do, and there has been some indications that it could be linked to funding in the future, but how that might play out and what the mechanisms would be, we currently haven't been told.
Councillor Kirk-Bernand.
Thank you. I see in number 3 in the paper that you comment about there being 3 private share target options, but of course we've put up with 2 options here, so I didn't quite understand that, and maybe you could comment on that, and maybe it's just a mistake there. I'm not comfortable with either of the options here, and my reason is that we're being asked to make a change that goes over some 9 years or so, and when we analyse the recommendations there, they range in the first 3 years of an adjustment of between 0.5 and 0.8 percentage points over the first 3 years, and then in the next 6 years we expected to achieve 1.2 to 2.8% per year. And I think that it should be set on a pro rata basis over the full period in that. My belief is that when you're trying to make change, it's always easier in the first period and it becomes increasingly hard. Why I'm asking this question here is it seems that we're pushing the problem aside to a large degree for after 3 years and to look after that period. And the reason for being uncomfortable about that is because of the issues of fares that have been changed from when we have a share shortfall, it ends up as a charge to the public, to the residents, rather than to those who enjoy the benefit. So can you comment about why we've put those options in that manner, please?
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. Just on the point regarding the 3 options. So look, I think it'd be fair to say we could have made that clearer. So the 3 we're referring to is the first option, which is the targets for the immediate set of years, and then there are 2 options for the third. So apologies, we could have made that clearer.
Yeah, so essentially the first target of option 1 is the annual plan, so it's just a derivation of our LTP essentially, so it's no change. And then the other 2 options were ambitious stretch targets. Now the ambitious stretch targets are profiled in a way that relate to the investments that need to be made for key public transport projects. So, for example, one of the key projects we have underway is the Linram project for additional long-distance trains, and you'll see that our patronage, and we're expecting our private share as a result to increase in the years where that project goes live. However, you'll see in the paper as well, there's a variety of fairly significant public transport projects that we would need to occur to obviously drive the patronage and fares revenue and make our operations more efficient. And I think those are listed in the paper as well. So the reason that we see relatively small incremental gains in the short term, that's really just optimization of our existing business. The larger changes in the long term are where the significant investments start taking effect. Now, the challenge for us is a lot of those significant investments weren't funded in the NLTF. So we are saying to the government, if you want us to achieve these efficiency targets, we will need investment. And this is the investment that we need, and here's the time we think we can get these investments on the road or on the rails.
Just follow up on that, thank you. I understand that point, but in the paper it also notes that any savings we make in OPEX costs will be beneficial. And I come back to my concerns about the 100 million for Waterloo, and it comments in there that there's a cost to that for development of Porua Station and a second station, which I think is the interchange at Johnsonville you're talking about. And, one of the options we have there is to make adjustments and savings there, concentrate on our core business, which is the...
Have you got a question coming up, Councillor?
Well, I'm trying to understand why we haven't looked at reducing costs as well, and I'm giving an example of an area where we can reduce costs and turn back to our core activities, which is stations, not TOD. Thank you.
So we note your comments through you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Lee, then Councillor Saw.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. And just picking up on the comments made by the public participant Tony Randall, he mentioned the target that we're already achieving, that the private share target of about in the 30s. But would it be fair to say that although that's quite ambitious, it is achievable? But if you're looking at the NZTA's target of 42%, it's almost unrealistic, and that we'll have to look at those options of whether increasing fares or reduce service.
Through you, the chair, the calculation for private share is relatively simple. We either need to increase revenues, I think, by in the order of about 70%, or we need to decrease costs by a similar amount. Those movements just simply aren't achievable, because if we were to try and get that from fares, which is about 95% of our total revenue at the moment, we'd have to increase the price by effectively 70%, and that sort of increase would drive a lot of negative patronage growth. We know that at the moment people are particularly price sensitive to the price of fares. I think we've heard from that already this morning, how important that is to some people. And the net effect is it's not possible, because if you do a 70% increase, you would lose that almost entirely in patronage alone, if not go the other direction. In terms of the cost perspective, we've been taking NZTA and we've shown them all our contracts, we've shown them all our cost structures when the money's being spent, and essentially we have very fixed priced cost structures which are based on PTOM contracts, and this is the way that the regulatory environment's been set up. We have these contracting tenders, we have awards, and we have fixed contracts that run for a number of years. And what we can do within those contracts is quite limited. We can't slash 70% of those contracts overnight to get those cost savings that are required, nor would we want to, because obviously we want a sustainable public transport offering in Wellington, and we can't make wholesale cuts and expect people to continue to use it. So yes, the targets were very ambitious. I think they might have been benchmarked on a time gone by, but in the current environment, those sort of efficiencies would not be possible without some very, very significant movements in either fares or cost.
Councillor Saw.
Thank you. Thank you for this very, very thorough, comprehensive paper. It covered off a lot of things I hadn't even considered, so I just want to thank you all for this paper. I have two questions. My first one, Captain Community Connect here, paragraph 5, which was that Super Gold Card and Community Connect is now considered part of public share. Could you tell me how and why that change has happened? Because, and whether my interpretation is correct, that it means that that private share target is a bit difficult for us if that component is removed.
Through the chair, exactly. This is a little bit of a contradiction, really, because we obviously believe that the Community Connect scheme is one of the best things we can do for targeting people that need public transport the most. However, that subsidy reduces the paying fare amount. So when somebody taps on with their Snapper card, they'll be paying a half-price fare. And because that fare is calculated as the numerator in our private share target, it actually reduces the overall percentage. That didn't exist. That only our Community Connect scheme only was brought into effect about 3 years ago. So essentially, that's another reason why, if you're looking at what our private share might have been and you're looking at it now, actually that subsidy is actually impacting that private share target. So we've highlighted that with the NZTA, and we believe that it's one of the best targeted subsidy schemes that you could possibly have, and it's a good thing, but at the same time, it's counterintuitive in terms of our private share targets.
And then my second question is, and again, it might be one of those ones that you can't quite answer, but I see our private share targets, and I assume our patronage targets were based on the assumptions that we would get the NLTF funding for all the improvements we wanted. What I foresee is that lack of investment is not going to help us build our network to be able to grow the private share target. So I'm just really wondering about that tension between having a network that's not getting the funding that we've projected and planned for, but also having to increase the private share.
Yeah, through you, the chair, this is actually something that we do model in our patronage forecasts. So we have investments, all significant investments are put in our forward forecast. So when we went through and redid the forecast for the annual plan, we had to reduce our patronage growth accordingly, quite significantly, because of all the investments that weren't funded. Some of those investments have very significant impacts on private share. Probably the asset control strategy is one of the big ones. Clearly, and we're already seeing, as part of the operator engagement through the new bus contracts, a lot of interest, particularly because we have an offering where the depot already exists or the assets already exist for a lot of operators. So it's certainly creating a market where we can get a bit more competitive tension than we otherwise would have. And we've done a Deloitte study that has shown through the asset control strategy that the council's cost of borrowing for funding these sorts of initiatives on long-term assets that will be there 30, 40 years is lower and is more affordable than obviously the private margins that we'd have to pay through bus operators. So there's a number of initiatives, including Waterloo Todd, and that's also a commercial opportunity. It's not just a public transport opportunity. These sorts of investments do have quite significant impacts on our private share. So once again, a little bit counterintuitive. We don't get the funding on one hand, but we get the elevated targets on the other. So it's a little bit counterintuitive.
So, just again, you might not be able to answer this. Does NZTA acknowledge that tension or that sort of contradiction and the potential perverse outcome that these two things that they've decided and imposed on us will have?
Through you, Chair, I think we can accurately say that the whole sector has found it a little bit perplexing, this sort of lack of coherence between very, very clear stated objectives to grow patronage, and of course in the Land Transport Management Act, encouraging passengers to use public transport and growing the network are legal principles behind that sort of govern us all. So we have been very surprised to see this apparent disconnect, and sorry, we can't really speculate on how NZTA have received that advice. They've received the advice and obviously clearly reflecting on it, but we couldn't speculate on what their understanding when those targets were first set.
Okay. Councillor Staples.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me a second bite. Mr. Randall, in his presentation to us, stated that the bus service, or the Wellington bus service, was around the 33% of private share now, but the trains weren't. Do we break it down to look at that, or do we look at it as a public transport network as a whole, rather than looking at whether buses pay more than trains, bus users pay more than trains, etc.? And also in our modelling that we've done, if we were to, I guess, treat trains differently, would that see fares rising on the trains? And do you believe it would be an incentive for more people actually not to come into Wellington City? Because that is the biggest use of the trains, isn't it? People coming in to our capital city to work and play.
Through you, the Chair, I think we've had a couple of conversations that generally come back to a discussion on cross-subsidisation, what level of cross-subsidisation is appropriate for a public transport authority, because it's inherent in any city where you have high-density areas and lower-density areas. The higher-density areas support the lower-density areas. We also recognise that the lower-density areas are often the areas where people go when they can't afford to live in the high-density areas or closer to town. So there's various social and economic drivers for the pricing of public transport. We don't believe necessarily that our short journeys are any more expensive than or comparatively more expensive than the long journeys. We do international studies that we participate in that show that actually our short distance journeys are probably a little bit cheaper relative to our long distance journeys, and we can provide that report if required. The second question, we are concerned that there has been a patronage decline, particularly on rail, and we've investigated not only the private share of the individual rail lines and the individual bus services, but we've also been looking at potentially why that is occurring. And affordability in the current environment is a key factor for a number of people. And as you'll be aware, we have a very long public transport network. It goes out to Masterton, which is almost 100 kilometres. It's a very long journey, and obviously the return journey for many people is more than $35 now. So that's a significant bite out of somebody's daily pay packet. So I think the caution that we need to sort of express here is be very careful at the moment, because we do see a negative decline, and we do believe part of that's based on the current economic conditions we see, and particularly on longer distance journeys, increasing the cost of those fares may be quite detrimental to those journeys. And one other study we have done is we have looked at the rate of decline, and the rate of decline is greatest at the outer stations. So if people are already paying the most for their zonal journeys, up to 14 zones, they're more likely not to travel into work or try and find an alternative. Closer on the railway stations, the one closer to the city, we're finding lesser declines. So clearly, affordability and distance is a factor.
Councillor Duthie, and then you can have another crack, Councillor Saw.
I was inspired by Councillor Staples.
Oh yeah, 2 bites of the cherry. Councillor Duffy.
Thank you. I found paragraph 22. I can't see page numbers, sorry, so I'm not sure where that is. Paragraph 22.
323
Quite
of the-
a very valuable paragraph. Thank you very much. And so it deals with that these private share targets have been based on a 2018-ish baseline and how things have changed since then. So one is about overcrowding at the time, and we've added additional capacity that raises the cost, but it increases the value of the service. And then the other one was around improving driver wages and conditions. So we could reach higher private share targets by going back on those things and to have fewer buses and make them more overcrowded. We could lower wages and conditions. But that would have a consequential effect on patronage and on reliability, as we all acutely remember. Is it possible that that sort of trend in that direction would actually end up undermining the private share targets, because the depression of reliability and therefore patronage ends up eroding the very revenue, say, or the private share saving that you have made by cost cutting like that? Is that a reasonable sort of correlation?
Through you, the Chair, a very reasonable correlation. I think a few of the councillors that were here in 2018 and 2019 would recognise that that environment we were in wasn't sustainable. It wasn't sustainable for a number of reasons. Obviously, the driver wages were too low and we had consequential driver shortages. We've been asked by the central government to obviously decarbonise our fleet, and that comes at a cost both to infrastructure and the cost of the vehicles themselves. So that's additional cost that's been placed due to government policy. And as one of the other councillors, Councillor Saul mentioned, we've had government policy around community connecting, which is also reduced. So central government policy has directly contributed to the reduction in private share. We'll also recognise that there was significant overcrowding in 2018 and 2019, so that wasn't sustainable. We didn't simply have enough capacity, so we had to add more capacity, hence more cost to take those people. And there's two other impacts that are clearly taking effect. One was inflation, which isn't in our control. We couldn't control the fact that inflation came through, and that resulted in indexation of all our service contracts, which is 80% of our total cost went through in inflation. And of course, societal shifts. We know that people are working from home, so they won't be travelling as frequently, but on certain days of the week, we still need the same capacity. So clearly there's been quite a lot of change since 2018-19, but that environment we were in clearly wasn't sustainable for a number of reasons.
Okay.
Is
Councillor
mine
Saul.
good?
Yeah.
If anyone can humour me, again, inspired by Councillor Kirkman, and I'll set it up and then there'll be a question at the end. I guess what I'm seeing here, particularly in the section from paragraph 18, which is page 322 of Diligent, is that misalignment with our requirements under the Local Government Act for these private share targets. And I can't help but see that this private share target, the fast track legislation, water reform, and the Māori wards referendum that we're having to hold are creating significant costs for Greater Wellington and other public transport authorities that, again, is from central government policy. And so I have a bit of a concern there where we're having cost escalations and potential lowering levels of service because of these policy choices. And so my question is, are we able to quantify what that cost will be if we have to go forward with to incorporate these private share targets into our local government planning processes?
Through you, Chair. I'm not too sure how to answer that question, to be honest with you. Look, there is a cost to any initiative. There are many of the very beneficial initiatives that have come our way that we've really supported that have come at a cost. So, you know, there is always that dynamic. In terms of quantifying it, I think, you know, we can only stick with some of the things we know here. What's the impact on patronage? What's the impact going to be on levels of service that we can provide? They're the things that we can quantify. One thing that we are doing, and through you, Chair, maybe a reference back to Councillor Staples' question about sort of economic benefits. We are working with our PTA partners across the country on a study on economic benefits of public transport. And one of the things that does come out very clearly from international literature, very well attained across a range of disciplines, is the benefits that very wide regional public transport networks provide both to employers and employees. And it is about increasing employment pools, increasing employment choice, and cities and all major cities around the world that are vibrant and growing have one common thing, and that is a subsidized public transport network with very, very clear and articulable public transport benefits. We're working through that sort of paper to articulate that a little bit more, so we have a little bit more of an evidence base. And actually, it is a piece of work that NZTA themselves are, very interested in and doing some work with us on. So hopefully, we'll have a better base as well. But for the time being, it is really just these metrics that we have in the paper that we can comment on.
Just to follow up on that, if I may, will that economic analysis include some of the public health benefits and those broader benefits of public transport as well? Because I think they are quite significant as well in terms of the public health benefits that public transport provides. And then just another follow up from that is, I guess what I see is that if we look at the rest of our agenda, there's a lot of transport related pieces of work that are quite needing a lot of attention. So what I feel is there's an opportunity cost for our Metlink team of this sort of work taking away from other things we have to do. Is that a fair observation to make?
Through you, Chair, I think it's a little bit of wait and see at this stage. If these targets are imposed on us and our funding implications, then we probably will have to focus on optimisation. What shape and form that might look like, we do not know. But it would be fair to say that that would provide a degree of work for the business to implement that optimisation, because change, particularly if it's not growth, is generally more difficult than change that is positive growth, if that makes sense. Sam.
Sorry if I can just jump in through you, Chair. I guess the other thing is that the targets, it was signalled in the GPS that there would be private share targets. So I guess we knew that we'd need to be doing some work around them, and today's paper is the culmination of the initial phase of that work, I would say.
Right, I've got a mover and a seconder in Thomas and myself as seconder.
We need to identify which option.
Speak to the option, but also introduce the 11th recommendation I think you're proposing.
Yeah, kia ora Chair, kia ora everyone, and thanks Tim and Emmett and everybody else for the considerable amount of work to develop this detailed analysis and to, work through it with NZTA over quite a period of time. I know that's taken a lot of time.
So before you go on, option 1 or 2?
Well, what I was going to say is move the recommendations as they are, and then I was going to sort of outline.
No, in 7 you've got a choice.
Yes, but I was just getting to that,
okay.
Which is the reason I think we should move the recommendations at all is because I think we can be confident they align with what we've already set up in our LTP. In terms of the stretch targets, we've got 2 options in front of us. So I was going to suggest that we move option 1 there, because it is more realistic, essentially. And I think that's a theme of the whole kind of paper and our approach that we may adopt here. So I would move the recommendations as they are, with option 1 as the choice there, in the recommendation where we have that choice. And then I was going to suggest another recommendation, which is just thinking about the debate that we've had this morning, and is a recommendation to suggest that, or to request officers to prepare a paper that could set out an accelerated roadmap for a couple of key measures on ticketing that we know are linked to patronage growth, because that's essentially what we want to do here. We want to grow patronage. And I think so I've put it up here. Fare capping and integrated fares between rail and bus. Those are 2 measures that we know would significantly support patronage growth. So I thought we could put those on the table here as well. I guess I was going to say a few things, Chair, just about the resolutions as a whole and the approach here. I mean, we are, as far as I can see, we're doing our best to comply with the government direction that is not aligned with our strategy. Obviously, we are used to this in local government, and so we're working in good faith to comply with the direction that has been set by the government, that we don't entirely agree with in all its aspects. As I said, I think that the near term targets here, they will be challenging given the trends on patronage around rail, but we're in a position to get close to them or to achieve them. They're achievable, they're realistic, so I think those are reasonable. The stretch goals, it's important to note, I think they're predicated on investment being committed to and delivered by central government, by the NZTA. So that is not the case at the moment. In fact, as we know, and as the paper sets out, our 3-year investment program for public transport infrastructure was not funded really at all. So that's something important to say. I think some other key points. Look, I mean, I feel like it's widely acknowledged now that the targets that were set towards the end of last year are unrealistic and unachievable. And I think it's fair to say also they were met with quite a lot of public consternation and dismay. So I think that's been noted by all partners, and hopefully we're working towards a more pragmatic decision. So hopefully we're going to contribute to that. I think the idea, there's a sort of philosophy, I guess, behind the government direction, which is that we should reduce the share of public investment that pays for public transport. That's a philosophical choice that's linked to politics, I guess. But I guess it's a problem for us because the best way to grow patronage is by improving the service, which costs money. And you only need to look at the bus service and the rail service to see that, right? Bus patronage has gone up at the same time as reliability has gone up, and actually at the same time as customer satisfaction from our research has gone up on the bus. The opposite is true with rail, right? Rail patronage has gone down at a time when rail reliability has gone down, and customer satisfaction with rail trips has also gone down. So, these things do correlate to a large degree. I guess the last thing I wanted to say is that, as we've talked about before, I think a big sort of lack a big gap in the discourse, public discourse on this, is the value of public transport, and recognizing that when you invest in when you place public investment in public transport, you get a public return, which is valuable for everybody, whether they use it or not. It's valuable for efficient use of roads. It's valuable for efficient urban development, which costs less for infrastructure per new dwelling. It's valuable for more cheaply reducing our emissions, which is a government objective. So I think you only need to, if you think about the road user aspect of this, you only need to look at the signal failure at Wellington railway station the other Monday morning and the very significant congestion that caused to see the value of public transport in our rail network, and the loss of productivity and delays to people and inconvenience that caused. So I hope that adopting these targets that are realistic, that are achievable, that are based on evidence, will put us on a stronger footing to grow our patronage, to continue to grow our patronage, and with it our fare revenue. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Nash. Look, here's an example of an issue that's been handled very, very poorly by the New Zealand Transport Agency. Totally tone deaf to the very notion of public transport and what it attempts to achieve. They seem to have leaned into a philosophical cars best type argument, which seems to have been put forward by the last Minister of Transport, and they've done that in an unquestioning style, and we've had to marshal with other regional councils to push back on that. Quite frankly, I resent having to do that. It puts us all in a bad position. It puts public transport in a bad light at a time when we're really trying to grow public transport, embrace what public transport means and what it can and does deliver to our communities. So look, I'd be hoping that we can draw a line under this with the New Zealand Transport Agency. I think the targets that we're identifying are fair and reasonable, and I'd be looking for greater support in the future from government to those targets. I can certainly say that we seem to have a more reasoned and temperate approach in the new Minister of Transport on these issues. I don't think we'd be having this conversation today if we hadn't turned a bit of a corner in the last 3 months. Councillor Conley.
So I wanted to speak to this paper because it's one that I struggle to know whether or not to support. I certainly do not support a private share target, for very philosophical reasons. As Councillor Nash outlined, I believe in the value of public transport for the community. I believe in public transport for lowering emissions, for making it easier for those who do need to use the roads, for improving equity and improving urban spaces. So for a whole bunch of reasons, I think public transport is an incredibly valuable thing, and we should be socialising the cost of it. So just tautoko to the free fares people who came along before, I very much agree with their philosophy. However, the paper kind of changed my mind, that I thought it was very, very well written and a very good paper. So it certainly didn't change my mind in relation to the philosophy that sits behind private share targets. But what it did was it outlined the program of action that we would have to do to achieve the private share. And these are things that we already want to do. These are great goals, in my opinion. These are transit-oriented development at Waterloo, 40% more buses, peak trains every 15 minutes, bus prioritisation lanes. These are things that I think are great and will make our public transport services better. So I've decided on balance to support this paper because I believe what we're putting forward will improve our public transport services, and just wanted to make it clear that I'm not supporting this because I believe in private share targets. When the private share targets initially came out, I OAA'd New Zealand NZTA for some information around it. In particular, I asked, have they done modelling on what their private share targets would do to patronage? And their answer was, no, we're leaving that up to the PTAs. So they have no idea what these public share targets mean for public transport authorities and what it means for the travelling public. And I just find that really staggering. So we're the ones on the pointy end of this. We're the ones that will see what potentially, at the very extreme ends, putting in place their private share targets will do to our public transport network. However, on balance, I think our team has done a great job elucidating some great projects that will lead to a better public transport service. And for that reason, I'm going to support this paper.
Thank you, Councillor Conley. Councillor Lee.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and very good paper. I do support the option one. I think it is about playing the game. I think it's good to have ambitious targets, but the option two is unrealistic and unachievable. And I think using historic performance is not a good indicator of how we can actually perform in the future. I think we also need to know or acknowledge that we are the highest public share. We have the highest probably public share in New Zealand, probably next to Otago, and we're almost being penalised for being good performers in public transport. I think if we're looking at like 40% plus for public shares, definitely not achievable, and it could potentially be counterproductive in terms of if we have to meet those targets, we'll be looking at reducing our level of service or increasing fares, and that would be counterproductive. So very happy to support option one.
Councillor Kirkman and then Councillor Saul.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm speaking against the motions in regard to this. I'm very unhappy about the paper because there's not enough effort put into optimising efficiency, which also contributes in this area. Why do we need to worry about optimising efficiency? If you look at New Zealand statistics and that, since 2021, the average household sector savings have reduced from $23,000 to $6,000. The people we represent, the residents, no longer have the resources to get cost increases beyond inflation when we look to the years ahead. our chairman commented about central government policy and the central government being tone deaf. But the reality of it is that central government is struggling financially. Regardless of any changes of government, we've seen the pressures that are coming on long-term interest rates caused by the crazy policy that's coming out of America at the moment and that. And I was at a meeting of residents associations on Tuesday night, and they brought up this issue with me and talked about why we're not cutting down off-peak transport frequency, why we're still having buses driving around that are empty at times. They're concerned and wanting better performance from our transport system. I think also we've seen 4 years or so where we've had a shortfall in our in the fares income, a significant shortfall, and so we've got at the moment on our books, I think over $40 million of fare income from the last 4 years, and there'll be more added this year. We're speculating that'll be a further 5 million, and that's taking it away from the people who get the benefit directly of transport and putting it on to our residents across the country, across our area and that. And I don't think that's a very fair approach when it's been going on so long. It means that we have to make changes to how we're operating at the moment. Councillor Staples commented about the issues between bus and train, but I can tell you from information that I received from our officers last week that the percentage of fares that relate to the trains is significantly higher than the operating expenses that relate to the trains, and the fare income from buses is significantly less than the operational costs for the year for the buses and that. And so these are things that concern me. I mentioned Waterloo and my concerns there, which have been ongoing. The reason I mention that is because we've already, as a council, putting significant investment into the Hutt Valley through Riverlink, and that is paid largely by the residents across the region. And Waterloo will be the same. And the investment in Waterloo, we should come back to doing a station only there, and that will allow us then to do the investment in Pororua and in Johnsonville, where I think Johnsonville is the other one that's indicated in this paper. And so I think that there's better things we can do. From a point of view of our transport, I have a lot of confidence in our transport. There's silos of excellence that show up all the time. The work on Linrim and what our investment is there, the contract negotiations and how we're going about those, the depot investment that we're doing, and also across our assets. There's been indicated to Holdings a interest in looking to see whether we can get a better return from our assets that are involved in rail and fixed assets there and that. And so I think we can do better, and that's what I'm looking to do and why I'm voting against this until we can show the benefits of the optimising efficiency in every paper we do for transport. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kirkman and Councillor Saw.
Thank you. Just to reiterate my previous points of just acknowledging the work from the Metlink team of preparing this paper and all the other, I guess, quick changes we've had in the GPS and the NLTF funding. So I just want to acknowledge everyone's work in that space. And picking up some of the sentiments from my council colleagues, it feels like these sorts of decisions suggest that perhaps previous ministers, NZTA themselves, don't understand that transport is a network of multiple modes and that you can't pick favourite children and neglect other modes. In order for transport to work around Aotearoa, you need all the different types. And there's a very, very consequential relationship between two. For example, if you stop funding public transport, what's the counterfactual and how people are going to get around? And I would hope that through the work we're doing here and the rest of the work from, say, free fares and so forth, that we're able to have a more mature outlook on what a transport network looks like around Aotearoa, particularly as we need one for resiliency, particularly as we need one for the climate realities we're fixing, and also to pick up Councillor Kirkbanan's point, to rely on a mode of transport that is imported fuel is probably not a very good long-term strategy for Aotearoa either. So our efforts to decarbonise our transport network, to move people towards active modes, is actually quite sensible from a broader economic sense as well. Still bearing in mind that a roading network is required. So just wanted to make that point. I am reluctantly in support of this paper, but just really appreciate the work of the team.
Okay, Councillor Wolf, and unless there's anybody else, write a reply to Councillor Nash.
Firstly, thank you to the officers for the work that you've put into this. It is impressive under difficult circumstances. I like the ideology, the aims and objectives. However, I think that what we're being dealt with is over ambitious, difficult to achieve, and potentially unsustainable. We're reliant on other entities too for what we can achieve, and we've seen just recently with the likes of Kiwi Rail, Transdev, and actually NZTA itself, as to what we can be dealt with. We can do everything that we can possibly do, and I think you guys have done great. But there are other areas that we're dependent on. I voted against the LTP on the basis of debt funding and rates, implications on rates and reserves, and we heard Tony Randall, talk about rationalisation, costs, and all that sort of stuff, and I think we'll continue to do that. But at the moment, I feel that if something doesn't go quite right, and there is that potential, that rates, reserves, or debt funding will be where we have to seek our redress, and that's the big reason why I can't vote for this.
Okay, Councillor Laban, and then Councillor Nash.
Thanks very much, Chair. I suppose a lot of our debates, a lot of our papers, and a lot of our themes, Tim and Emmett, are always around, I feel, preaching to the converted. So we're always reflecting on what our numbers were last year and what our numbers were this year. As you know, I've raised a couple of times over the years whether we need to seriously change the way that we do things, and that it is the unconverted that we all know that hold the key to the future for us successfully as a financial model, patron, by whatever. And if you look at where those people are who are not engaging on public transport, they're now sitting in cars. And I just wonder, when I suggest that we need to change, we've talked about what I've always found is a lack of energy in the kind of marketing, promotions, advertising area in terms of trying to find ways to entice people that are not on public transport to use public transport. And all those cars that are on the Naurunga Gorge, all those cars that are on Petone Esplanade, all those cars that are coming from the eastern suburbs, what do we really know about where they're going? And what do we really know about why they're taking the cars and not engaging in public transport? What have we done to provide an incentive for them to consider using it as an option? I remember some time ago somebody raising the issue over, do we try giving people a snapper card for a month as an incentive for people using our service for the first time? Are we able to accurately pinpoint where the bulk of those cars are going, where the bulk of those workers are going? And as Tony Randall pointed out, people working from home, is that an issue or is that a thing? You know what I mean? Like, nobody's quantified the number. I do recall that there was a very successful cafe operator in Wellington that's now in the city here, that's operated a very successful one in Berrinpore, cashing in on those people that are now working from home who want their coffee fix. I don't know the numbers around that, but I just have a sense that we're talking around things in a lot of ways that I think are only going to be of minimal impact. And I don't mean to be disrespectful in that, but I just think that in terms of what we can do to the wider public that are not using public transport is a lot more than we currently are. That makes sense. Having said that, I'm going to support the paper.
Councillor Nash.
Oh yeah, normally we don't do right of reply, but it just feels like the vibe today feels a bit sort of serious and so on. So I will say, Councillor Kirkland, thank you for pointing out these silos of excellence in our transport work. We will cherish that compliment. I was also going to say that your point about the off-peak services, we specifically put off-peak services in because we wanted to reduce the number of split shifts, which was a large driver of dissatisfaction with the workforce, and which was a driver of lower reliability. So, that point about off-peak services, and it's worth noting that off-peak patronage has significantly increased, right, as a result of our work. So I think there's some things there. Your points about optimisation of the services, I mean, if you look at paragraph 46 of the report, there are quite a few points in there of where we are making cost-cutting measures that we don't really want to make, but we are doing our absolute best, and we'll continue to do that. So I think it's worth noticing that there is quite a bit of work there. I lastly just wanted to reiterate the point, when you talk about the direct beneficiaries, people who directly benefit from public transport, a lot of people directly benefit from it, right? Not just people who are paying a fare or going on a bus and a train. You've got to realise that everybody who lives in the region, everybody who uses a road, everybody who pays for taxes and rates or rent or mortgages for the cost of their infrastructure and houses, they all benefit from it, right? So it's very important that we keep that in our minds and do more to communicate that. And I know as a team we're working on that. So yeah, hopefully we can, with this decision, focus on doing the basics, which is continuing to improve our services and grow our patronage. So thank you.
Okay, councillors, with the so we're voting on an additional recommendation 11, and we're voting on 7A or 7.1. All those in favour, please say aye. Those opposed, 1, 2. Paper passed. Thank you. Excellent. Good discussion. Now we're going to go backwards before we go forwards. We are going to paper 7 on the agenda, then we'll break for morning tea. So paper 7 on the agenda is the decision on making change 1 and variation 1 to the regional policy statement for the Wellington region partially operative. Good morning.
Morena, councillors. We'll take the paper as read. So we're seeking your decision to make operative the provisions of change 1 to the RPS that are not under appeals. And this is a key milestone for us in terms of developing change 1 to the RPS. So these areas are around the freshwater provisions. So we are incorporating Te Mana Te Wai into the RPS, and this has involved our mana whenua partners, particularly the statements of Te Mana Te Wai of Rangitane o Wairarapa, Kahanunu ki Wairarapa, and Taranaki Whānui. We're also asking your decision on making operative the provisions around integrated management. This objective seeks management of the regional's natural resources in a way that is guided by Te Ao Māori. This is, as I mentioned earlier, a milestone for us. We've got a few things in the actual paper that Josie just wants to highlight for your attention.
Kia ora, councillors. I want to take this opportunity to provide the council with a brief update since we submitted the papers for this meeting. So firstly, subject to your decision, a public notice will be printed in the newspaper tomorrow in accordance with the 5 working days notice period before the provisions become operative on the 22nd of April. Secondly, we have noticed that a couple of provisions are duplicated in the list of provisions you're provided in attachment 1 and 3, and we're working to correct these to remove the duplicated provisions. Lastly, we have started discussing implementation of the operative provisions with mana whenua and territorial authorities. Last week, we met with Te Atiawa and Ngā Hapu o Otaki. And we've also been in contact with the TA planning managers regarding workshops to talk through the operative provisions. Porirua City Council has responded and accepted this offer already. And with those updates, I'll hand back to Council and we're happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Staples.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mine is a question about the actual changes, and I'm on page 42 of Board Books, which is the attachment 2 to the report, and it's a new definition of land-based primary production. And my question is around intensive farming, for instance, a pig farm or a feedlot or a poultry farm. Is that considered to be land-based primary production, even though it's in a shed of some description? And if it is land-based primary production, is it picked up somewhere else, or is this new definition not quite sufficient?
Including mushrooms, presumably. Yeah.
Sorry, I've just got, through the chair, I've got the definition in front of me now.
Because it's saying it's reliant on the soil resource, but a intensive pig farm undercover or a feedlot or a poultry farm is probably not reliant on this soil resource, but it is land-based primary production, or as our chair has said, growing mushrooms.
Yeah. That's a fairly detailed subject matter question, Councillor. I'd probably need to check on exactly what's intended to be captured by that.
Okay, Councillor Lee.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and a huge milestone. Timing is everything. I know if Attachment A provisions are approved or made operative, it's going to be quite significant for the Wairarapa plan and Hutt. Just looking back, how effective was that in terms of policy implementation for, I think, Wellington City and Puerua? Because timing wasn't quite right. Is that correct? But did we get provisions across the line?
Correct. So through the chair, the timing was a bit awkward with Porirua and Wellington City. Both councils did take into consideration what we had in Change 1. They weren't required to give effect to in RMA parlance because of the status it was in, but they did call and factor it into their drafting, and we did raise it in our submissions as well. I think I wouldn't want to put a sort of quantifiable number on it, but a significant amount of that freshwater direction has ended up in their district plans. Yeah. And it seems to be going a similar direction with Hutt City's district review as well.
Well done, thank
you. Councillor Duthie, and then Councillor Conley.
Sorry, Councillor Conley.
Caught him out of the corner of my eye, Ross.
So by making the non-contested provisions operative, does that, in particular for the Hutt and Wairarapa district planning processes that are underway at the moment, is that helpful in the sense of providing more certainty and clarity for what is likely to need to be applied in those district plans because they're operative and it just has to be done? So there's just a certainty advantage to territorial authorities district planning at the moment in this decision.
So through the chair, in a word, yes. So once the provisions are made fully operative, the amount of weight applied to them in these legal processes increases to, and again in RMA parlance, give effect to, so implement. So that reduces the uncertainty and creates a lot more stronger direction for those councils that are still going through this process.
Okay. Councillor Conley.
Thanks. So I struggled quite a lot with this paper. I mean, it's really tough subject matter, right? And I had to seek some clarifications. So there are clauses that we're not recommending, despite the fact that we have received no appeals on them, there are clauses that we're not recommending be made operative. Can you outline, summarise what those are and why we're not recommending that they be made operative? And I guess I have particular the provisions around emissions reduction from agriculture and waste and industry in my mind as to why that isn't on the list of things that we should make operative.
So through the chair, taking a sort of step back for a second, so we've got the three categories of provisions in Appendix 2, sort of all colour-coded. So the blue ones are the ones that are proposed to be made fully operative. The red ones are the ones that are under appeal. The black ones are the ones that are not under appeal, but we are not proposing to make fully operative. The rationale for that is that a lot of those provisions are potentially or likely subject to consequential amendments through mediation and working through the appeals. When we're in this space of mediation, there's often a case of an amendment to, say, a definition or to a policy will have a cascade of effects. Making a number of those provisions fully operative now cuts off our ability to do that, and is potentially also a little bit inflammatory towards some of our appellants as well.
What about the example I specifically raised?
So for that particular one, could you remind me, sorry, Councillor, what the provision was? The
emissions reduction from agriculture, waste or industry.
Yeah. I think through the chair, Councillor, that might need to be one that I double check on. I don't remember off the top of my head exactly what the relationships are there.
I guess just around those black ones, when I say the black ones, in the report, the ones you've outlined as black, there's a trade-off, right? There's a trade-off between allowing ourselves options to change things if we need to as a consequential result of other changes. But there's also the trade-off that we're denying those councils certainty around their planning because we haven't put a stake in the ground the way we have with the ones that we're adopting now. So do you want to comment? I mean, this is quite, I guess, it's kind of unsatisfactory in the come back to you later because we're determining now what's going to be made operative. And I'm suggesting that that's one that could be made operative. And so we need to resolve that.
The approach for the RPS change one was always taking a bit of a holistic and integrated approach. So these provisions were always, there's dependencies right across RPS change one. For the parts that were not appealed, that we're asking you to make operative today, we've determined that they're not having any further implications through the process. For example, the emissions around agriculture, if we make that operative, maybe the targets that we've established there might have to be increased or decreased based on the mediation across the other emission scopes that we have. So the idea is that because they're integrated, it is hard to, the team have gone through it in quite a bit of detail to understand through the current appeals where the interactions are. And that's why we've landed on the provisions around integrated management and the freshwater planning provisions to be operative now so that they can influence the plans going forward. And then we'll come back to you after the appeals process to talk about the other provisions and make them operative as well.
So do you, the councils, so Wairarapa and Lower Hutt that are going through their district plan processes now, what weight will they give these clauses that are non-operative? Like, will they be thinking about them in terms of their planning? I'm just, as I say, there are trade-offs by not making things operative now. What are those trade-offs for the district councils involved?
Thank you through the chair. So even if a provision's not fully operative, if it doesn't have an appeal on it, it does have a fair amount of legal weight, not the same amount as one that is fully operative, but it still has enough legal weight to the point that councils will have to take it into account, have particular regard to it. So they'll have to engage with adding this kind of direction into the district plans. And we have in previous submissions when we had the RPS provisions in the stage say, sort of particular regard to means we sort of do want it to be thought through thoroughly. We want to sort of see an assessment of how it could work in the plan context.
That's quite useful, actually. And is there a way that we can specifically communicate, so we're talking about communicating what we've made operative, but can we also communicate, here's some clauses that there were no appeals against. We're expecting that these will become operative, but we've just carved them out in order to allow ourselves some wriggle room.
Yes. Through the chair, yes, absolutely. So as part of our discussions with TAs around the provisions we are making operative, we can also factor into that, there are the suite of provisions that are not being made fully operative, but they do have this legal weight, and they will need to be then implemented to that extent through district planning. We can work through that with TAs as well.
Okay. With that, do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Saw and Councillor Lee. Do either of you wish to speak to the paper? No. Anybody else? No. All those in favour, please say aye. Those opposed? None. Paper passed, and congratulations to us all, actually, but particularly to you guys. Right. I'm going to take a break for morning tea. Probably come back at about 11:20. Right. Ben. Paper for decision. Paper 9, Greater Wellington's communication policy for the 2025 pre-election period. Benjamin, in your hands.
Good morning, councillors. Before I take the report as read, I'd like to comment that its purpose is primarily to inform councillors of our pre-election communication protocols and social media guidelines, as well as the Tai Tuara guidance for communications in the pre-election period. Now, the report also seeks to make you aware of advertising requirements under the Local Electoral Act. However, there is a tradition at Greater Wellington to make this paper for decision. A decision perhaps to throw a switch in your own minds to safely separate your communications between your roles as incumbent councillors and candidates. I'll take it as read. Are there any questions?
Okay. Most of you, it's all spin, eh? Most of you have been through this exercise in the past. So pretty standard. Councillor Staples moved, seconded by Councillor Nash. All those in favour, please say aye. Those opposed? Oh, did you? Okay. Thank you, Ben. Very clear paper. Message understood. Right, paper 10, Greater Wellington's, policy on the appointment of non-elected members to committees, subcommittees and advisory bodies.
Morning, Councillor. Morning, Chair. This is our triennial review of the policy. We have a number of changes. The most significant is just to clarify a number of arrangements for matters that are outside the appointment process, including mana whina appointees. We have consulted councillors and business functions and made a number of changes to enable more flexibility in the appointment process, particularly for advisory bodies. And we're also proposing increasing Greater Wellington's standard daily attendance allowance from $235 to $250. Happy to take questions.
Again, any questions on this? Do I have a move and a seconder? Moved Councillor Bassett, seconded Councillor Kirkman. All those in favour, please say aye. Those opposed, no. That passed. Thanks, Will. Paper 11, policy on elected members' allowances and expenses.
Me again. So again, this is a triennial review. We're just doing this before the election because we have been in regular communication with the Remuneration Authority and we're looking to align the policy around ICT allowances with their current framework and determination. In essence, it would remove the ICT allowance for councillors because they were all provided with and use a GW device.
Okay. That all understood, Councillor Duthie?
Yeah, a question not actually to do with the ICT thing, but when we maybe dealt with this policy earlier in the triennium, we talked about the travel allowance and approaching the Remuneration Authority with an idea of making it mode neutral. Can you just update us on where that conversation? I think we wrote a letter or something like that. Where did we get to with that, please?
Through the chair, the council actually made two rounds of submissions to the Remuneration Authority, And for one of those, the chair and officers had the opportunity to actually speak to the full authority. They took that on board. They said they would give it consideration. As an outcome of that consideration, they made no changes.
Sounds like regional council. Okay. Councillor Duthie, anything further on that?
What will you spend our ICT allowance on instead?
Just goes in the pool.
Facetious question, you can delete that one.
Francis thought better of that. Okay. Do we have another questioner? No? All those, sorry, mover and a seconder. Yeah.
So I've been the outlier of this term in that I requested a GW laptop because, well, the reason was at the time I was working for Defence, so I had a Defence laptop, but clearly it wasn't appropriate for me to be doing GW stuff on my Defence laptop. And so I requested a GW laptop. But I actually did find it really useful to have the GW laptop and a tablet as well, because this is quite good for PDF reading in a meeting. I guess that's down to more specifics, but are you intending on giving people a laptop instead of a tablet, or would there be the option to retain a tablet for reading PDFs like on Diligent?
So just to be clear in terms of the allowance, regardless of what device you had, you wouldn't get the allowance. So that would be a matter for ICT to discuss with councillors. So we're currently looking at the proposal for the next triennium. I would say, the current option is we would give people an iPad. If they wanted to have a laptop instead, then the policy provides that they could swap that out. If you wanted to have a laptop as well, I think that's an individual matter to take up with ICT about that arrangement.
I think I'll just add a clarification to that. The expectation of the Remuneration Authority, and they've tightened this up over time, is one device. So under this policy, there's a choice. The councillor has a choice. The default position will be an iPad, generally equivalent to what councillors are using now. But if a councillor has a preference for a laptop, they will be issued with a laptop, but it won't be two devices. That's outside the scope of the framework that the Rem Authority has set.
And what's the ruling on phones? So we're still using our own phones, and are we allowed emails and other documents on our own phones? Because it would seem that the concerns around security that apply to devices also apply to phones.
Ross Lynch, our Chief Technology Officer, is online and he'll answer that question.
Thanks, Francis. There is a slight difference in the security profile currently applied to our Greater Wellington phones versus our laptops. Our laptops have a different set of security controls applied. Our GW issued mobile phones are closer in their security profile to people's personal phones, so that distinction isn't made at the moment.
Councillor Staples.
Thanks. Can I just seek some clarity around the ICT allowance? Because reading through here, we still, am I correct in understanding that we still get an allowance for using our printer, mobile phone, etc., and the consumables that we need?
That's correct.
That's correct. So
it's just the laptop tablet element.
So there used to be a portion of our ICT allowance that was to cover a laptop, and so that's dropped off, but we still get something
That's
for
correct.
using our own paper, etc.
Including mobile phones,
okay.
etc.
Thank you.
Right. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Bassett and Councillor Duthie. All those in favour, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Paper passed. Thank you. Changes to Council's delegations of powers, functions and duties, April 2025. You again, Will.
Indeed. This is a small change to enable an additional position in the Policy 5 regulation space. The only reason we're bringing it to council is because we're required, council's required to make all RMA changes. So it's really just a technical change.
Okay. Do I have a mover and a seconder, or okay, Councillor Kirkland and a seconder, Councillor Saw. One end of the political spectrum to the other on that paper. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? No. Paper passed. Thank you.
And yet so much in common still.
Right. Paper Lucky 13, Unlucky 13. Draft Statement of Intent for the WRC Holdings. Kia ora korua.
So the purpose of this paper is to provide the draft statement of intent for WRC Holdings. This is aligned with the statement of expectations the council issued in December 2024. We'll take the paper as read, and we look forward to your feedback and comments.
Okay. Any questions on this paper? It's pretty clear. Councillor Kirkland.
Yeah, I just want to make some comments here.
So hang on a sec. Are any of those comments questions? Can we move? Do you want to move the paper and then speak to the paper?
I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Kirkland, Councillor Bassett, in your hands. Councillor Kirkland.
Thank you. Look, there's 4 of us here who are on the WRC for the councillors, and that the 2 points in that there's been quite a difference of change with a grant coming in to support the services and that, and he's come in there more as a CEO and supporting there, and other people might want to comment on it, but it's brought around quite a lot of change in that in a really positive way. And so that when Sarah's maternity leave comes up, we just need to think about what the expectations are there. But it's been very beneficial in that the alignment and thinking at executive level, the alignment and thinking around the WRC board and the issues we're dealing with have really progressed a lot with that change. The second point on it is there's a whole piece of work.
Point of order, I'm not sure that this is appropriate to be talking about in a public space.
Can you move on from those comments, Councillor Kirkland?
Yes, I think so, and I think it's there's no issue on it and that sort of thing. Where there's a whole lot of work that is being suggested that we'll do around the rail assets and that in the future, and it's all positive. And what I want to comment on in a general sense is that there seems to be across our organisation a attitude to let's review and see if we can do things better through WRC and that. And I think that's really significant. That I've been on there for 5.5 years now, and it is in the public interest in that we have progressed things in such a positive way in that. And I just want to make those comments because it doesn't happen without it being across the whole organisation and that. And I welcome comments from the other directors on there, whether anyone else, how they feel about that.
Okay. Councillor Bassett.
That's right, just add to really what Councillor Kirkland has actually said. I think looking at the structure, the result, particularly around Centreport, which is only one, which is the key, a very key asset of for this council and for the Wellington, in fact, nationally. And I think it is appropriate time to actually do a review in terms of looking at potential opportunities to enhance that business, but also to look at potentially a better return for this regional council. So I strongly support the recommendations.
Okay. Any other councillors? In that case, all those in favour?
We need to,
Oh,
we just need, there is no two. There is no two.
so it's just 1 and 3. So councillors' recommendations 1 and 3 only are being part of this motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? Paper passed. Thank you. Finance update, Ali, which is for your information. Okay. Morning, Daryl. Right, in your hands.
Morning, councillors. I would like to present the paper for the financials, Grade 1 financials to the end of February 2025. Before I take the report as read, I would just like to point out 8 months into the financial year, we were expecting a $35 million surplus. We are currently at a $9 million surplus. There are a number of items outlining the reason for this variance in the report, which I will endeavour to answer questions on. I'll take the report as read.
Okay. Right, Councillor Duffy.
Thank you. In the attachment, the key variance commentary, it's an interesting $6 million underspend in the environment group, and this variance is expected to remain for the full year. I'm just interested to get a bit of information on what that is and why it is. That's quite a significant amount of money in the context of the environment group budgets, which are often stretched, and we often can't do things because we don't have the resources. So to see an expected full year variance there is. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, I think that $6 million, as far as I'm aware, is for Pinehaven, which we've updated councillors on in the past, and that's because we have been reviewing how we're going to approach that piece of work. So that's why we're carrying this $6 million, I believe.
Do you need any more explanation on that, Councillor?
I think if it is mostly Pinehaven, that's understandable. It's mentioned there that it comes from knowledge and insights and catchment as well, but maybe they're less significant proportions of it.
Through the chair, we can provide those details.
That'll be useful. Thank you.
Will do.
Okay, other councillors? Questions? No? Okay. Yep. Councillor Conley.
I guess at what point, I mean, we know that there are significant challenges this year. At what point do we start getting stressed that we're going to have to look at solutions like we had to do last year to cover any potential deficits?
Through Chair, I'll answer this one, Daryl, if you like.
There you go.
We're not concerned yet, and you might remember at the meeting, actually I can't remember when it was now, but I think it was October, I said I'd let you know when I was stressed. We rework, and I think I said in the February meeting I'm a little bit stressed, if you're using that as the scale. At the moment, based on the forecast figures that we have, we are in a manageable space and would not require any debt cover, particularly in the PT space where we've got the patronage revenue stresses. We are redoing those forecast figures now. At the moment, it is not raising any additional concerns, but when we have finished that work, we will talk to you about it again. And if we need to, start exploring additional options for the end of the financial year.
Good. Okay. Right. Sorry, Councillor Bassett.
Just one question that I just to clarify, in terms of the rates and levies in particular, the first column, they're always, when you look at them, they're always quite accurate in other words, what I'm saying is the actual is against them. The budget is generally just about the same. In terms of, I appreciate the territorials collect those rates. What happens in the case of arrears of rates, and are we affected by that? And I'd just be interested to know what actually happens there. Has it risen the amount, or are we affected by it?
Through the chairs, yes, we are affected by it. There has been some small, I guess, increments in late payments, which is possibly why you're seeing a difference there, but it's not all contributed to that. Some of it is actually to do with additional housing units which have occurred, or rating units which have occurred after we've set those rates. So, yeah.
No, that's good to hear. The second thing is just about the levies. Is there the levies? Is that a similar situation?
Actually,
Through your chair, because the water levies are directly to the councils, they are always paid in full.
Councillor Colley?
Could I request a little bit more money around a little bit more money?
We just did those papers.
We just did that. Yeah, that was 3 papers ago.
Sorry, that was Freudian. A little bit more information around the spend on water supply. I find it a little bit confusing that Timarua is underspent, given that we brought forward quite a lot of work. Though that may have been, I may be getting confused between financial years. And then it also says that we're looking to push forward 9 million to next year. And I just want to make sure, does that mean we're envisaging we will spend the other 5 mil? Like are we proposing we will in total spend less on Timarua than we had thought, or are we just
through.
You go.
Okay, through the chair. So Timarua, the project was at a stage where they actually put it on pause while they did some other work, and the reason why they're gonna push that work through till next year. So that's the deal with Timarua. So the actual spend will happen. It's just been delayed until the other work is completed.
Can I have more money and more information around how the timing of the Timarua project is, so I'm across it? I don't know whether that's from you or from Julie, but yeah.
Final questions? No, for information only. So moving on to exclude the public. Good to see you, Sam. So item 15, do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Saw, Councillor Connolly, all those in favour, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Paper passed, public excluded. Do you need to clear the room?